Hey, everybody. We are live on the Mental Health Warriors podcast today. It is Friday, May 17th, and today we have Doug Noll joining us, and we are going to have a great show. Adam is going to pop back in at some point. Technology is a beautiful thing for us sometimes, but we are going to do a little intro, and then we are going to kick off the show. Awesome. Welcome back. So today our topic is the dangers of arguments. I feel like this is going to be a very interesting and possibly a very fun conversation. Hey, Adam is back. Doug, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, people. My name is Doug Noll. I am a lawyer turned peacemaker based in Central California, just south of Yosemite National Park. And my short story is that I grew up in Southern California, went to Dartmouth College, came back to California after Dartmouth, and went to law school in Northern California, moved to Central California. And from 1978 until 2000, I was a hardcore civil trial lawyer, trying hundreds of jury trials, bench trials, arbitrations, bankruptcy hearings, all kinds of contested cases. Along the way, I picked up the martial arts, and around my 40th birthday, I was awarded my second degree black belt. And my teacher told me to go study Tai Chi as a martial art. And Tai Chi is the oldest of all martial arts. Tai Chi has two interesting paradoxes. The first is the softer you are, the stronger you are. The more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Well, this didn't compute. As a hardcore trial lawyer and a secondary black belt in Northern Chinese animal style. But I practiced and continued to work at it until finally, several years later, I was in a courtroom cross-examining somebody. And the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? So after that trial, I had a vacation planned, running a whitewater trip up in Idaho with some friends. And I spent the week thinking about how many people I had really served as a trial lawyer, and concluded that I really only served 5 people out of hundreds and hundreds of cases over 20 years. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not here to just serve 15 people over a 30 or 40-year career. So when I got back to town, driving down out of the mountains to my office, I heard what turned out to be the one and only public service announcement on our local public radio station for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies at Fresno Pacific University. And so I enrolled. And for 3 years, I was a full-time master's degree student, a 3/4 time law professor, and a full-time trial lawyer. And that kind of led to the end of my first marriage. Anyways, I couldn't come to terms with my partners. They were not happy about me becoming a peacemaker because I was the second largest earner in the firm. And they did not want to see the goose that laid the golden egg go do something else. So ultimately, I decided to leave. I left $10 million on the table, walked away with a week's worth of notice, and started my peacemaking practice in 2000. Just a couple of highlights. After that, in 2005, I had an epiphany about how to calm angry people down. And so I developed a skill called affect labeling. I didn't invent it, but I developed it. Which allows you to calm any angry person in 90 seconds or less. 2 years later, a brain scanning study came out of Matthew Lieberman's lab at UCLA explaining or showing why affect labeling is neurologically based and why it works the way it does every time without fail. And that led to me co-founding the Prison of Peace Project in 2010 with my colleague Laurel Coffer. We started our project in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, training women serving life and long-term sentences, how to become peacemakers and mediators to stop prison violence. And the first skill we teach them is how to listen to emotions, how to reflect, how to affect label, how to calm people down. And today, Prison of Peace is all over the world. So that's expanded far beyond our expectations. Anyways, the project led to my fourth book, De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less, and which is now in 5 languages. And I've spent my time today working in conflict as an arbitrator, mediator, peacemaker, and training people how to stop fights and arguments in their lives forever using these skills. In a nutshell, that's what I do.
Wow. Questions? Nick, what questions do you have after that? You were asking Doug some questions before.
Well, yeah, no. Well, obviously, I want to know the 90 seconds. How to think I was under 90 seconds. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's what I'd like to know. How do you calm down people in 90 seconds? But my question was, with a lot of conflict, do you sort of approach it from someone? How do you sort of get people to resolve? Is it sometimes there can be other people who are causing the conflict, or is it how people in themselves in the conflicts? I guess it could be, someone who, it could be. Do you mean it could be someone you're managing their own emotions so they don't cause a conflict? How they manage their own emotions, or it could be someone else who's needs support in who's. So is it both those ways in that sense? Does that make sense?
It's all of that plus more.
Okay. Glad you understood me.
So what I've learned is conflict. The fundamental cause of conflict is people who are not being heard. Foundationally, that's the cause of all conflict. And when people feel heard and feel validated, they calm down, and then they can. Then at that point in time, they can talk about how to solve problems. So I teach my graduate students de-escalate, then problem solve. The problem that most people have is because they can't manage their own anxiety. Somebody starts arguing or yelling or screaming or getting upset. Those who are not trained have unconscious anxiety over that emotion, those emotions. And so their brain says, stop being emotional. And the way we do that is we either emotionally invalidate, which we something like, don't be such a drama queen, but I do listen to you. Stop crying. Oh, you're taking this all the wrong way. I've got a 5 pages single spaced of emotionally invalidating statements. So we emotionally invalidate, especially with children, which, by the way, is the most pervasive and insidious form of abuse that exists and does more damage to a child than any other thing you can do other than maybe physical or sexual abuse. And there's a lot of science around that, but people don't talk about it. I don't know why, but it's incredible. So we got emotional invalidation, and then the second problem is jumping to early problem solving. So let me ask you guys, how many times have you been in a situation where you're upset and somebody comes in and says, well, look, if you would just do this won't be a problem? Did that ever happen to any of you? Raise your hand. Why? Right. And how did it feel when that happened to you?
It infuriated me more, I think.
Infuriating. It's infuriating. You feel disrespected. You feel patronized. You feel belittled. And most importantly, you don't feel heard. So let me ask you this. How many times have you been confronted by somebody who's upset or angry or maybe in grief? And you say, look, if you would just do this, this, and this, the problem will go away. Have you ever done that? Yes, we all have. So the question I have is, why is it that when somebody tries to solve your problem when you're upset, you hate it, and yet you immediately try to solve somebody else's problem when they're emotional with you?
Is that human nature then, Doug, do you think?
No, it's lack of training. What it is we are trying, and the same thing with emotional invalidation. We are trying to soothe our own unconscious, unmanaged anxiety around another person's emotional experience. And we are not trained from childhood how to manage anxiety and how to manage our own emotions, not to mention somebody else's emotions. And this is something that is a cultural bias that existed for over 4,000 years. We have an extreme bias against learning about emotions. And that's fundamentally the cause of 99.9% of all conflict in the world.
It's interesting your point about listening, because I do a lot of public speaking. We do Toastmasters, and active listening is one of the skills I teach. And people are really bad at actually properly listening, and I think I think we filter and we don't listen properly. And that's when often miscommunication can take place, and we misunderstand what someone's saying, or then I think sometimes conflict can arise because of misunderstanding, miscommunication, because people weren't actually listening properly to what each other was saying.
Let me just say, active listening does not work. It never has worked. It never will work. It is based on the work of Thomas Gordon, who was a psychologist out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison back in the 1950s. He was a protege of the humanist psychologist Carl Rogers. Rogers wasn't interested in how he got the results that he got. He would talk about the unconditional positive regard for another. He was not an academic. He did not study his methods and methodologies. So people would take transcripts of his therapy sessions and try to figure out what was going on, and nobody really dialed into what he was doing. Thomas Gordon kind of got the idea that listening was really important, but what he did is he focused on how not to blame. So he came up with a formula that goes something like this. So when you leave your socks on the floor, it makes me really angry because I feel disrespected. And that is an absolute appropriate response to that situation where there's no blaming going on. You state the condition, and then you state how you feel, and then why you feel that way. Perfectly good. It was great stuff. Unfortunately, his work got perverted by the human potential movement in the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s. And that formula got twisted around to what I think you're feeling is X, or what I hear you saying is Y. That passive-aggressive, passive voice formulation does not work. It pisses people off. And in fact, there's some brand new science that shows artificial intelligence out of Japan. They did this amazing analysis between therapists and patients. And they analyzed therapist-patient interactions. And they found that when therapists were self-referential, in other words, they used I statements, the trust level between the patient and the therapist dropped dramatically. And when the therapist used you statements, the trust level between the patient and the therapist rose exponentially. So in my teaching, you only use an I statement when you're asserting your own emotions. Otherwise, you use a you statement. And my basic process is very simple. Number one, ignore the words.
Yeah.
Number two, read the emotions. Your brain's really good at it. From evolutionary biology, we have this innate ability to read other people's emotions with 100% accuracy. But again, our cultural biases have caused us not to work with this capacity, but it's innate. And then number three, reflect back the other person's emotions with a you statement. So Nick, I might say something like this. Man, Nick, you are really pissed off. You're frustrated. You feel completely disrespected. You're feeling ignored and not heard and unappreciated and unsupported. You're really worried and concerned. And you're sad and upset and distressed. And you feel helpless and hopeless sometimes. And really, at the bottom of it all, you feel like you've been completely abandoned. You're all alone. You feel betrayed. And you feel completely unloved.
How do you know?
Now, I'm going to ask you how did it land with you? You're not any of those things, but how did it land?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think if there's a sort of I think. Well, you're going to reject it and say, "Well, no, that's not true at all." I guess
most people feel a settling.
Yeah, there's a warm.
You feel like a relaxed.
It sounds like you're
I feel relaxed. Like, oh, hey, he's right. I really get this.
Yeah, there's a nice feeling to it.
That's your brain reacting to affect labeling in the way that Lieberman demonstrated it in his brain scanning studies in 2007. We can't help ourselves. That's why this works first time. Once you learn it, once you master it, it works all the time. It works without fail. And it's because the way our brains are hardwired, which is really cool.
Is this in your book? Please tell me that some of this stuff is in your book.
all the basics are in my book.
Okay, good.
I've got 250 blog posts on this. I've got online courses. I'm doing everything I can to push this out in the world.
Who's your say your book, for example? Who's your book aimed at? I mean, I guess this could benefit anyone, but is your techniques aimed at people working in, you mentioned prisons, but I mean, is your technique for everyone, or is it actually everyone in conflict resolution situations particularly?
No. What I did, the way I wrote the book, is the first 3 chapters lay out the basics, how I discovered it, the science, and the basic concepts. And then the rest of the book takes us through the arc of life. So we start out with how do you listen to 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who are having temper tantrums? How do you deal with preteens? How do you listen to preteens that are angry? How do you deal with the sullen, unresponsive teenager? And then I get into dating and relationships. How should men listen to women? How should women listen to men? How do you listen to your partner, your spouse? And then what do you do in divorce? How do you manage the emotions of divorce with all of this information? And then we get into, I go into workplace, how to listen as a leader, how to listen as an employee, as a teacher. How do you de-escalate angry kids in school? There's a whole chapter on that. So I basically covered the arc of life and probably 90% of the encounters that we all have day to day. And the reason that it works, the reason that I can write that way, is because after years and years of doing this work and being enmeshed in all kinds of different conflicts, patterns arise. And to the uninitiated, conflict look like it's a big mess. Fights and arguments look like, oh, this is horrible. It's a big mess. But to me, people are just being emotional. It's just a predictable sequelae of events for which there is a designed intervention that will always lead to the same outcome, which is to calm people down and bring peace. And once you learn that, emotions are no longer something that you run away from. They're something you run towards because you can solve the problem and create peace in 90 seconds.
Everything that you said was beautiful. Well spoken. Thank you, Doug, very, very much.
You're welcome.
My question is, when we've got the situation that is anger filled and it's gone from anger to violence, de-escalation with conversation may not be the most appropriate response. In that situation, do you agree that the best thing that you can do is retreat?
Yes.
Moving backward from the situation.
Yes.
Grabbing your book.
Get the heck out of there.
Grabbing your book and leaving.
That's right.
Get the heck out of Dodge.
Get the heck out of Dodge.
Because you were talking percentages, and when we're talking about an escalated situation whereby we have the potential for violence, which has already been signaled, it's much like the addict. We all have addictive behaviors, and whether it is the addiction of the person who numbs with food, for example, you start craving that Mars bar long before you're ready to go to the store and get the Mars bar, and the situation started from there. So when we're talking about the violent domestic situation, it's already very clear that is.
I would submit. First of all, I want to agree that if there is incipient violence, somebody's about to throw a punch, get out, run. That's something we've always had a rule in the prison work. If you sense any violence at all, leave right now. Protect yourself before anything else. Mm-hmm. However, people can get extremely verbally violent without getting physically violent. And when they are in that intense verbal escalation, That's when you have to stand into it and use these skills. And you will calm them down. You will calm the other person down. They will calm. They can't help themselves. They will calm down in every single circumstance.
Is it learning to perhaps calm yourself down?
That great question. Here's what's really cool about this. As you practice these skills and master them, and it takes about 6 to 8 weeks of good practice to really begin to master the skills, you become more emotionally self-aware yourself. You become able to emotionally self-regulate. And you get to a point where when somebody is really angry, and maybe they're spitting mad at you and insulting you, and the verbal aggression is pretty intense, you are able to be there, present, in a calm, confident, and compassionate space without feeling any threat or fear or anxiety at all. The metaphor I teach is, imagine you have a baby. And you're holding this little baby, 2-month-old baby, and a baby poops. Baby uses pooped. Do you throw the baby in the trash can because the baby pooped? No. You take the baby and you clean the baby up, take the diapers off and clean the baby up and get the baby warm again with some milk. And you take care of the baby. That's what this work is. When somebody is really angry, they're emotionally pooping. It's the same thing as holding the baby. And you learn the skill of dealing with that emotional pooping that allows you to do it with compassion and confidence and calm and centered presence. And anybody can learn this skill. That's the beauty of it.
Anybody who is willing.
Of course, you can't teach people who don't want to learn. But I will tell you, in California, we have had over 700 of our students released, long-term resident lifers released from California prisons. And to our knowledge, we only have one person who was reoffended.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm up here in Canada, so we're not too far away. I'm just a little bit northeast.
Up in Vancouver?
I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So
Right.
The skills that you're teaching are skills that would help many inmates within our system as well, whether that's in the female or the male system. It's in the human condition, and there's the one common denominator, which is you.
People have a deep need to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, people do not have the skill to listen to people. I call it listening people into existence. We do not have the skill to listen others into existence. We are so focused on getting our own need to be heard met that we ignore the needs of the other person.
And we can learn, just like we learn to put our pants on.
It's like learning how to ride a bike.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ashley's just like beaming with the desire to speak. What do you got to say, Ash?
Oh my gosh. I think I just ordered the book. Let's just be honest here, because I have a 5, almost 6-year-old and a 13-year-old, and there is like headbutting like no tomorrow. And I know I struggle with regulating my own emotions. I am one of those people that if you get on my bad side, you're going to know about it. So this is like, oh my, I'm soaking it all in is what I'm doing. And I'm just...
It will change your life, Ashley.
Well, I ordered the book. I think I actually ordered 2. So I am looking forward to that arrival when it gets here.
I know I make big claims, and it sounds like who's this crazy guy in California saying, but I've got so much quantitative and qualitative evidence behind this work that I can make these claims. Because
did you tell the audience what your legal background is? What was your...
I was a civil trial lawyer for 22 years. And as I said at the top of the show, I went back to school in my late 40s to earn my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies, left the practice of law to become a peacemaker. And 5 years after that, had an epiphany about how to calm people down. Because I've been studying neuroscience since 1995, just when fMRI technology was coming out and the whole field of neuroscience was expanding. I was under the tutelage of a guy by the name of John Allman, who was a neuroscientist at Caltech. And he taught me how to read neuroimaging studies and gave me a long reading list and kind of got me into it. In those days, the number of neuroimaging studies done in a year, you could count on 2 hands, right? Or your hands and your toes. Today, 20,000 a year, you just can't keep up with it.
What year was that?
That was 90, I guess it was probably 98, 97, 98, somewhere in there.
Interesting.
And I wrote the very first piece on the neuropsychology of peace and conflict. And that was in 2002.
Pretty. That's it was such a pivotal time for many people to begin speaking about unspoken things.
Right.
It was beautiful. Yeah. It was beautiful. Adam, what you got thinking about there? You're so quiet.
I've been having really bad technical issues all night.
Divine synchronicity. Isn't it amazing, hey?
But I'm still here. It's only took me 26 minutes to start talking, but I'm all right. Hello, everyone. How are we? I've just been listening to all of you, and I just think it's absolutely phenomenal how
good.
Yeah, listening is actually better than just us speaking sometimes anyway. And
Poker
I just
players
think
could learn a
it's
lot
absolutely
from this.
phenomenal of how it is.
Poker
It is.
players.
And I just find it so
poker
phenomenal of how we find it so easy just to turn to arguments. And I'm always saying to people, like for example, I say it to my 12-year-old autistic son, and I say it to my partner from time to time as well. When they're looking for an argument and I'm in a good place, what I do to wind them up, I'm like, if you want an argument, go and find a mirror and go and argue with that. They just end up walking away. Do I see that as victory then? I don't know. But I know it winds them up.
So when people argue,
what do you think, Doug?
When people argue, when they want to argue, all they're looking for is to be heard. They're not arguing to be right. They're arguing to be heard. And my experience is that once they're heard, they don't have to agree with you. They're just so happy that they've been heard. They don't care about the problem itself. And that's the beauty of all this. And we're all focused on this myth of rationality that's been out there for 4,000 years that says that what separates human beings from other animals is our capacity for reason and rationality. That's all bullshit. There's no science to support that. The science says that we are emotional beings. Our essential human nature is to be emotional. And yet we live in a society that denies us our essential human nature. And this goes back to before the Greeks. And it's been carried in philosophy and theology for 4,000 years.
Yeah.
And it's just led to enormous abuse, human abuse over the years.
Do you see any correlation between the inability for people to speak freely on social media and the increase in anger?
Sure. Here's this foundation. Social media has exacerbated, accelerated, amplified a fundamental problem in Western society, and that is called adult normative alexithymia. Adult normative alexithymia describes a condition where we are unable to recognize or process or express our own emotional experience. And it's adult because it's expressed in adults and how they behave when they cannot express their emotions. And it's normative because we have a society and a culture that says we should not be emotional. And it's alexithymic because alexithymia describes a condition of being unable to recognize and process your own emotions. And so people suffer from adult normative alexithymia. And all the studies show that when you suffer from this, you don't have the ability to think because basically your prefrontal cortex, right ventral lateral prefrontal cortex has been shut down. That's where emotions are created. It's shut down by the emotion. And so now you are reactive. And the only thing you have available to you are the reactive behaviors you learned at 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old. And so when you see this crap on social media, what you're seeing is a bunch of emotional pooping by people who are suffering from adult normative alexithymia. So I've got a pretty big YouTube channel and other social media channels, and I get snarky comments.
I understand everything that you said, and what I'm speaking to is the shadow banning, whereby if conversations are said, even spoken.
Oh, right, because people are so uncomfortable with topics that they don't agree with, or they are offended by topics that they don't agree with because they haven't been properly schooled, so they don't have good critical thinking skills, for one thing, and they have adult normative alexithymia. So when they hear an idea or a thought that violates their values and beliefs, they don't have the capacity to inquire, to be self-referential and self-aware and saying, why am I so upset about this? And by the way, what am I feeling right now? I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I'm frustrated, I feel disrespected, I don't feel like I'm being heard. They can't do that. So they can't self-regulate. And so they end up, doing stuff on social media that just makes the problem worse.
It was interesting. I don't know the exact timeline. And I remember when a very famous sportscaster in hockey, really, really fun guy, he used to dress up in colorful suits. Anybody know who I'm talking about? Don Cherry. When he spoke out, he said, "You people."
Who?
And he was, it went, and his role as a sportscaster, which he'd been doing for decades with flair, was just wiped, etch a sketch, because he offended you people, those people, by identifying someone, by speaking his opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of the reason for the intolerance is that, well, there are a lot of reasons for it. Number one, educational systems in the West have declined precipitously in the last 30 or 40 years. I was blessed. I mean, there's unintended consequences to everything, right? I was blessed to go to
Don't get me started on education, please, Doug.
Unintended consequences. So I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. In those days, women did not have, there were very few women lawyers, very few women doctors, no women engineers. So what did women have to do? If they wanted a career, they went into teaching. And I had geniuses as teachers. And then in the 60s and 70s, things started to open up a little bit. Women had more opportunity. And these geniuses that were in the school system teaching kids were now pursuing careers in business. And thank God, businesses and law. But the educational system never recognized that. And so there was a slow sinking into mediocrity. And today, if you go to a state university like here in California, and you look at the people that are in the education schools training as teachers, they're generally speaking in the lower half of their class. So then we have the large classrooms, impossible to teach people how to write, impossible to teach people how to critically think. So we've lost this ability. That's number one. Number two, the iPhone came out in 2007, 2008. People all of a sudden got addicted to the screen. They started learning how to text, and they no longer had to interact with each other. And kids no longer went out and played with each other. Parents were afraid to let their kids go out and play. In my day, mom would say, "Get out of here and don't come back until sundown." Right?
It's true. It's true.
And that doesn't happen anymore. So
cursive writing was removed.
Kids don't learn how to negotiate.
No.
They don't learn how to resolve conflicts on their own. They don't learn to talk things out. All those skills that were implicitly learned in childhood are no longer available to kids. And then on that, we get the double whammy of the pandemic, where these kids are locked in for 24 months with no social interaction. I mean, no wonder it's a mess. But the solution is just teaching people how to listen. And it's not that hard to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna bring some up, which even I'm gonna learn some from this. Yeah. Well, I want to bring some up, which even I want to learn from this, and I'm glad my partner Kerry's tuned in tonight for this. Obviously, there's people live with borderline personality disorder out there, and autism. But what I want to know is, because obviously I know that both sets of them have intrusive thoughts, and they don't know how to express how they feel. So sometimes they can turn aggressive when they're trying to spit out what they're feeling. How do we understand that? And how do we interact with them on a calm level?
So that's a very common problem. And the key in learning this skill is to recognize that emotions are generally, for most people, are unstructured data. And the human brain is really poor at dealing with unstructured data. So what I teach my students to do is how to turn this unstructured data that we call emotions into a highly structured database that we can access almost immediately. And you learn over a period of time that when somebody is speaking, you're listening to and reading their emotions, and you'll sense the emotions that are not being spoken, that they don't know that they're feeling. And you're able to bring those into consciousness by labeling them, and that allows the speaker to process emotions they weren't even aware that they were experiencing. And so as the listener, you are able to go much deeper into people's lives, their emotional experience, and help them process that so they get a deep sense of relief and validation.
I was blessed to be a preschool teacher for a few years, and we had a gorgeous chart at the front of the classroom, and it was these felt faces. It was a big poster board type size. It was large. We had come together and created it, and we had faces with words underneath: silly, happy, sad, angry, irritated. And every class, one child had the opportunity. They were picked so that they could prepare for the next day, because it helped when they had the opportunity to prepare so they could explain what feeling it was. And we talked about feelings. I feel silly. And when we were able to understand that a child was feeling silly, we would possibly see the behavior later. Oh, he's being silly. And then we could identify that behavior and say, okay, Johnny, it's always a Johnny, right? Johnny, I understand that you're feeling silly today. Would you please work on feeling quiet, or whatever word it was, so that we could coach them towards the feelings that were better suited for the community of children that we were working with?
The process you were teaching them is called emotional categorization and emotional granularization. And this is a developmental process that begins at 18 months. It really continues throughout life, but it's most important between 18 months and about 8 or 9 years of age. And basically what children have to learn how to do is, okay, let me back up. We're not born with emotions. We are born with something called affect. And in our development, we start developing emotions at about 18 months. It's when we start to verbalize and when the emotional centers of the brain start to mature and come online. And what we have to learn how to do is associate affective experience, which is something we're born with an emotional word. So we're born with 9 affect. And each affect has valence, high arousal, moderate arousal, low arousal, and intensity. That would be timeline, duration. And so if you've got these 9 affect with all these different layers of arousal and intensity, it's like an artist's palette. It's an infinite number of feelings we can have, experiences. And what we have to learn how to do is associate cognitive constructs with each one of those different affective experiences. This does not happen. This is what's supposed to happen, but it's not what does happen. Most people never have come up or grow up in a family where they are taught how to categorize and granularize your emotions. So what you were doing was extremely valuable. Brene Brown did a great study, talks about it in one of her books, about 7,000 people were asked about their emotions. They were just testing emotional granularity, and the vast majority of people could only come up with 4 words: happy, sad, glad, and pissed off. That's it. And that is, Atlas is mine. And that is an indicator of adult normative alexithymia, and is also an indicator of how poor we are at training parents how to coach their children to becoming emotionally competent. What the studies show is that when you start at 2 or 3 years old and you start affectively your children and coaching them as emotional coaches, by the time they're 12, they're 2 grade levels academically ahead of their peers. And they have the emotional maturity of an average 21-year-old.
Fact. My first son, when he was at an age of being able to enter into kindergarten, was able to do the alphabet backwards. And he missed the opportunity to go into kindergarten because he was 3 days short. And then being fathered by a man who was a batterer to mom, and then, of course, an abuser to his children. He was far ahead emotionally. Therefore, he was able to see what was going on, but wasn't allowed to articulate it with half of his parentage. So he then went into a state of rage. Normal. Everything was normal. And every single bit of it that happened from that was normal, as well as the community service that he did because of the behavior. It was all normal. So when we look at our children, when we look at other people's children, because we love looking at other people's children, don't we? Oh, yeah, he was that troublemaker. Oh, yeah, she was that girl that was loose, whatever it happens to be. So, if we can come at it from compassion.
There's a foundational piece here that can't be overemphasized, and that's emotional safety. Most children in a normal home, that is to say a non-obviously abusive home, every home is abusive when there's emotional invalidation. There's no way around that. But that's a normal home, it's considered not abusive, even though it's incredibly abusive. But the point being, by the time a child becomes 6 to 8 years old, the child has agency, able to start taking care of himself or herself, make decisions, argue, own little individual. Long ways to go to become an adult, but is agency. That child learns really quickly that there's no emotional safety, that the universe is an emotionally unsafe place. And so what's the child do to self-protect? Generally speaking, build walls that nobody can penetrate and keep all the emotional stuff inside and project a competence.
That's where you see them, the chewing on the sleeve.
That does not exist.
The ringing of the a lot of the
in the really bad, and in the really bad cases, you get cutting at 13, 12.
I was going to say cutting. Mm-hmm.
You get addictive disorder.
Yep.
You get. There are all kinds of problems that arise later because of the lack of emotional safety. Mm-hmm. And the only cure, and I'm not a therapist, I'm just talking from my own practical experience working with some of the most troubled people in the world, murderers in maximum security prisons. The only thing that I've ever seen that worked is to teach them how to create emotional safety for themselves and for other people. And when that happens, it's dramatic. the transformation is dramatic.
It's beautiful to see.
And so the message is, if we want peace in our world, if we want to have children who are well-balanced and successful, we have to make sure that they are emotionally safe all the time. And that is the responsibility of the parent. And we have these 21 and 22-year-olds who are, they don't know anything. They don't know about emotional safety. They were not raised in emotionally safe environments themselves. And they just perpetrate the abuse generation to generation to generation. And sometimes, in your case, Nancy, it's horrible. So you're dealing with a battered or a domestic violence problem. And I will tell you that your husband was alexithemic and grew up in an emotionally unsafe and abusive environment. He was, all you're seeing is his programming playing out when he was a child.
I agree.
And you see it over and over and over again.
And what happens is that we spend so much time repeating the patterns over and over and over again. Like, why do I always end up with assholes, right? How come it's poor me? I'm always attracted to these people. Victim.
And that gets us into the victim mentality, which is the same thing. It's lack of emotional safety because we don't have the confidence to be ourselves, to be our truly authentic present selves. And as a result, we engage in all this reactive behavior. But it all goes back to childhood programming.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Everything that you said is just like bang.
See, like,
it's so obvious. It's so obvious when you see it. And you start seeing the patterns, and the patterns repeat themselves over and over again. As humans, we have a very small repertoire of behavior. We have a very small repertoire of emotional behavior and of emotion, very small. And once you see the patterns, then you see it everywhere. And it becomes obvious.
Yeah.
So what matters most?
Yeah.
What matters most? In my opinion, what matters most is learning how to master your emotions. Learn how to listen to other people into existence. Learn this new 21st century skill that's only been around not even 20 years. Learn this skill, master it, and pass it to your children so that they can pass it on to their children.
So what if someone gets your book and they're still struggling?
They email me, doug@dougnoll.com.
So you agree that, leading the witness, you agree that reaching out to an expert is important when you're struggling.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a jazz violinist. I have a coach, right? I'm one of the great jazz violinist teachers in the world.
Yeah.
And I work with her every other week.
Yeah.
That's stupid not to do that.
Why I have an accountability coach.
Yeah.
Great one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this is once you learn the skill, which, like I said, takes.
Who's actually commented, Nancy, by the way?
I'm sorry. Repeat. Oh, Christopher commented? Aw.
Once you master this skill, you don't need me anymore because it's automatic. And this is a self-affirming skill.
Yes.
The more you practice it, the more you want to do it.
And your life begins to change in the most wonderful ways, and it changes exponentially. So when you change one pattern, when you change 1% of your life, that 1% expands every single day.
That's correct. If you were to invest in anything in your life, this is the one thing that I encourage people to invest in.
Do you know what? For a long time, I've never seen Ashly this quiet. So let's hear from her.
Wow, I don't think I've seen you this quiet, Adam, but I know you're glitching out and your technology is wigging. Like, okay, so I know it's something that, to teach kids when, like you said, from like that 18-month to, the 8-9-year-old range to manage their emotions, to begin to process or understand or even identify what their emotions are. So say they haven't had any of that because I never had that growing up. So it's not something that's too late to go back and teach, is it?
No, Ashly, if I can take a woman who is 6 years old and is a serial killer and train her how to be a peacemaker and mediator and completely transform her life, it's not too late. Rather not have to do it in prison.
Right.
Or at the end of life when we're helping someone transition to the next
Right.
phase.
It's not
Because
too late.
if we don't change our thoughts, behaviors, and actions, they will continue no matter where we're at. So if you're looking forward to a peaceful resolution
Right.
of death, which I think we all want to rest in peace, right? Isn't that the whole marketing campaign? Thank you very much, Hallmark. Then the option is to begin. When? Today.
And it's a very, how do I just, I'll talk about something that's a little personal. I have a 96-year-old mother. She's in her last, she's cogent. She can still take care of herself, but
Yeah.
you can
I'll say
clearly,
something and then we'll go over to Nick because I know he's been quiet.
But I had a lot of issues with her over the years because I was born with a lot of disabilities.
How do I get around this?
And it was this work that allowed me to reconcile.
Yeah. How do I get around this? Because I just how do I get around this? Because fear. Oh, I know. It's amazing, this technical issues. It's every week. How do I get around this? Because normally I don't have fear, but I've been programmed to have this fear dotting around me. Now, I'm not scared of dying. I'm not scared of heights or anything like that, but I'm scared of going to the gym. Yeah, I'm scared. Because of obviously judgmental comments, people looking and laughing and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not in the best shape, but because of that. So I'm scared of that, but I'm not scared of dying. How does that work with each other?
Well, remember that there are 7 layers of emotions. And the layers are anger,
yes,
disrespect, fear, disgust, shame, sadness, and abandonment.
Yeah.
So you don't feel fear or anxiety.
Right.
But what you do feel is shame and humiliation. And so it's the shame and humiliation that makes you averse to being in a public place where people can look at you and you feel like you're being judged and criticized for the way you look. And so I would say, so Adam, and you feel, every time you go into a gym, every time you think about going into a gym, it scares the crap out of you. And it really makes you sad because you really want to get in shape and you know going to a gym is going to work for you. But the shame and humiliation that you feel and the judgment you feel and the implicit criticism that you think people are giving you because of how you look and the fact that may not be a very good weightlifter is really causing you to be afraid and averse to going to work out.
Yeah, because it was because obviously I know we haven't come across each other yet, Doug, but I obviously have been at AA meetings for the last 6 weeks now, coming up to 7. And yes, I've admitted I'm an alcoholic and stuff like that, but when I first went into that meeting, I was scared shitless, and I had intentions of being judged then. But now, I'm full of fucking confidence. I don't care. I love these meetings, and I just talk. So,
Good.
but the real me's coming on, and I've noticed the masking slow down. It's come off. I've noticed it.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
The more confident you become with your emotions and you recognize that we're emotional beings, the more authentic and vulnerable you can be. Remember at the top of the show, I talked about soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. The more you can do that, the more you can be in your own authentic self. And you get away from this macho idea that I can't let them see me sweat, rugged individualist. The idea that, I am a mountain unto myself, an island unto myself. It's all bullshit. And as you begin to master your own emotional self,
you
have more strength and more power than you can possibly conceive of. I talk about our emotions as our hidden genius and our hidden superpower. And it takes training to learn how to use it. But once you get the training and you learn, then your life changes. And all that pain goes away. It all goes away.
Is it possible
Yeah.
for you, Adam, to
Yeah.
see
Yeah,
the
do that.
person that you, is it possible for you to see the person that you are in the AA meetings, being in that space, that bubble, that energy space that you're in, and take that energy and that safety that you have and toodaloo into the gym with that?
I would if I take a crystal with me, a healing one.
Cool.
I would try this. So when you think about going to the gym and you feel the terror, the fear reaction coming up, the anxiety, the first thing you want to do
I'll
is
definitely take the rose quartz. I'll take the rose quartz from it.
Yeah, label what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid. I'm anxious. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
I feel shame and humiliation.
What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, yeah. Or on your situation, yeah, just I think you're overthinking it. Take the crystal and do it. Yeah, no, I mean on this side, I think I'm working in a school at the moment and do a lot of supporting one-to-one with children with special essential educational needs. But the listening is a big thing. I think I hear the teachers so often when they get frustrated with children, they say, like tell them off not listening, and because I think the children at a young age they get distracted, and I think when you see them in the playground when they're arguing, it's because they're rather than listening to the other person, and we do as adults, we try to get our point across, and the more we try and get our point across, we're determined to get our point across. But why can't that person understand us? That's just listen to my point, and then you both raise your voice and you try harder and harder to make your point because you both think your point is right. And then obviously then it escalates into a conflict situation. I see it at the playground, and obviously what we do as adults, and I think so. Listening certainly is something that the teachers and myself we try and get not just we try and do it, but we try and get children to listen more to teachers, to each other, and I think and certainly with the kids I support with special educational needs, when they don't feel listened to, they get frustrated, and that frustration comes out it's up one bangs the table, but it's just a frustration. They don't feel listened to, and they can't often express the emotions they get. So it's that's definitely something with the whole sort of listening and just one other thought was I think Doug, you talked more about how emotive humans are emotive, and that's a great saying where we make decisions and we act behave based on emotions, but we'll often justify it on logic later. So you said that humans are supposed to be logical, intellectual beings, but actually, everything we do based on emotion. We make decisions. When we go shopping, we buy things based on emotive connection. We make decisions, behave based on emotion, but afterwards we'll justify it by saying, well, actually, why I did this was a logical thing, because you can justify anything afterwards. But
it was on sale, Nick. It was on sale.
Exactly. There's saving money. There's a good reason. You can justify anything logically afterwards. You're
right. You're right, Nick. We every decision we make is an emotional decision. There's no such thing as a rational decision.
No.
And
that's why marketing works.
Pardon me now?
That's why marketing works so well.
Of course, and sales and relationships. In relationships, I tell people, reason and rationality have no business being in relationships. If you want strong relationships, whether they're business, professional, or personal, abandon reason.
Absolutely.
And so it behooves us to learn the skills of emotional mastery. And the fundamental skill is affect labeling, learning how to listen to listen to and reflect the emotions of another person.
There are so many techniques. There are so many techniques that support what you're teaching. So what you're teaching and what Adam was saying in regards to going into the gym. So once he identifies that emotion, I'm afraid. I'm nervous. I'm whatever it is. The emotional freedom technique tapping jumps right in right there, even though I am feeling
Right.
totally freaked out about going into the gym and I'm afraid of what everyone's going to say. And I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I'm afraid that I'm going to keep right. And, you know, right. And then I completely love and accept myself. Moving through those emotions so that now that you've got the understanding, applying movement to it, moving through the emotions. Move.
Energy and motion.
Energy, motion.
That technique has been proven to be effective, but the problem is that there are many circumstances where you can't use it.
Well, I mean, even though I'm getting the shit beaten out of me and I'm afraid to leave, you know, it might not be the most effective time. Right?
Exactly. Affect labeling you can use anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And it will work every single time once you
combine with other things that you already know or that you're willing to learn.
Right.
So cool beans. Cool beans. Time's up.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you
what
guys,
I've done, Doug, what I've done
you.
is I've posted your email into the...
I would like you guys to give me a quick takeaway before we close this out. Give me a quick takeaway of what you've learned in the last hour. One thing. Nancy?
Emotions are amazing and wonderful and great. Okay. I used a lot of ands, so that's cheating. It's a whole sentence. Cheating. As smart.
Ashly?
Yeah. Emotions.
What are your takeaways?
That it's never too late.
Never too late. Nick?
Well, I think it's all been. I think your point about listening and I think it's all been. I think that's my takeaway. I knew it a bit anyway, but I think it's all reinforced that point, and I think it's yes. I mean, even I can improve, and I think listening to myself as well as listening to others, it's that wide skill. That's my takeaway.
Adam, what's your takeaway? Yeah. Adam, can you hear me, Adam? I know he's challenged today, isn't he?
Yeah, the technology is just sucking.
Just about.
What's your takeaway?
Come on, I'm the outcast here. I'm joking. No, what's my takeaway? Action shows power.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that's a wrap for today, my friends.
Right. Wrap. See you next Friday.
We will be back live next week, Friday, for another topic.
Yeah, next Friday, Nancy. Nancy, you don't know the title. You don't know the title, Nancy. So